Hello, everyone, and welcome back to those who already joined the conference, and hello to the new attendees. So, thanks for joining us. That's the second edition of the Secure Our Streets conference this year. My name is Sergey Weber. I'm your host for today. I'm not the only one. We have a couple of colleagues who hosting all the sessions. However, I'm one of those ASRG leads. Uh, I'm the lead from Berlin, so happy to say hello to everyone. So before we jump into the presentation of Kamel, I would like to stress another topic. I want to make you aware that you can go and engage with our sponsors in the booth. You can mingle and chat within our lounges, which is with like-minded people from cybersecurity. So feel free to join from time to time. Stretch your legs, get a coffee. Uh, I was instructed to say so. As an adult, I have the responsibility. Yeah. Furthermore, we have a little problem. Let's say the Kamel, who is going to present the next session, is not there. However, we have a fallback solution. We have a video recorded, and I will play this video. So feel free to stay here to watch this video together with me. And after that, Kamel would join us to answer all your questions. So at least as many as the time allows. So feel free to stay here. I'm gonna share the video, and you can ask your questions in the Q&A section. So we have Kamel, and I play the video.
Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming to my talk. My name is Kamel Ghali, and today I'm going to be talking about falling backwards into automotive security. So, from the title, I would say obviously, but it's very not obvious. You might have a pretty hard time understanding what I'm going to be talking about today, but essentially, what I'm going to be doing is walking through a little bit of my time in the automotive cybersecurity industry and talking about the different jobs and positions that I've worked and explaining the different things that I learned along my way, how I learned them, where I learned them, who I talked to, what kind of skills were useful at different points in my career, and talking about the different types of jobs that are available in automotive security. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and quickly just go over the agenda, despite the fact that there's not a lot of helpful information in this agenda. So instead of going through each different, aspect that I've got up there, I'm actually just going to kind of explain briefly the objective of this talk. So, I've been in the automotive cybersecurity industry for more than 6 years now, and that's not a lot in the scale and in the grand scheme of things when you consider industries that are very well established, like traditional cybersecurity or the automotive industry. But the automotive cybersecurity industry, this kind of cross between these two very well established industries, is still very new. And so, I'm very lucky to have been in the industry for a long time. I've seen things from a lot of different perspectives. And I very commonly get people that will approach me and ask me, like, hey, how did you get into automotive security and car hacking? What exactly did you do? What did you learn? Should I go to university? Should I go for some certification? Is there some sort of career path that I can follow for automotive security? And the boring but pretty true answer is that this industry is still very new, and there's not a lot of very well established career paths that one can take. So a lot of people find themselves a little bit lost and not sure what kind of jobs exist, what kind of work they can do, what they should study to be able to become a member of the automotive cybersecurity industry. And that's something that a lot of people actually approach me about. And so I wanted to kind of give this presentation to walk through some of the different hats I've worn throughout the years, and maybe, if somebody out there is able to find some little bit of guidance or find some way to maybe look at one of the jobs I performed in the past and think, hey, I have some of those skills, or hey, that sounds like a lot of fun, I want to learn how to do that. What I'm hoping is that anyone watching this will be able to find some way to get into the industry, because I think it's a really great place to be. There's a lot of different ways that any given person can be involved. There's not like limited to like 2 or 3 jobs and you have to know these 3 things. It's a very, very broad industry, but again, that also adds to this feeling of lostness that some people might feel when they're trying to get into it. So without further ado, let me just really quickly introduce myself. So again, my name is Kamel Ghali. Thank you all for coming. I'm a security delivery manager at Accenture in Japan. I'm currently not only working for automotive clients, although automotive security and in general embedded security and product security are my strong suits and where I tend to enjoy working most, and that is kind of where I'm prioritizing my time at Accenture, but I am by no means restricted to this. I'm a trilingual car hacker. I speak English, Japanese, and Arabic, and I'm trying to learn Korean, but at this point I can only say like 2 or 3 sentences, right? Like things like man eats food and stuff like that. But we're getting there someday, right? I'm currently the lead for the ASRG Japan branch. As you can see, this PowerPoint template is actually the one that we use in ASRG Japan. It is not a conference specific one. They told me I can use whichever one I want, and I quite like this one. I actually made it myself, so if you enjoy it too, that makes me happy. I'm a member of the Car Hacking Village. This is an organization that promotes vehicle security and car hacking at different cybersecurity events and conferences throughout the world. I'll talk a lot about them throughout the presentation because they are a big part of the journey I've taken through the industry. But in addition to that, I'm also an organizer for the B-Sides events series here in Tokyo as of last year, and I'm a trainer and regular member of the Auto ISAC. So I've been around for a long time, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I'm presenting here today, is that I want to kind of talk not only about the jobs and professions you can take, as an automotive security enthusiast, someone who's interested in car hacking, automotive security, but also the different communities that you can either contribute to as a speaker or a researcher, but also learn from, right? They're chock full of really valuable resources, both technical and non-technical, that anybody can find benefit in. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning. So a lot of people will actually ask me, like, what did you go to university for? Or did you major in automotive security? Did you major in cybersecurity? And not quite, right? So when I was in college, in University of Michigan in the United States, I didn't actually ever consider working in cybersecurity. I didn't really consider in working in the automotive industry at all. Because at this time, right, relative to today, the automotive cybersecurity industry was like pretty much non-existent at this point. This was, I think, the story of how I got into this kind of begins in 2017, but as far back as like 2014, 15, if you're familiar with this, you may know there were people who were doing kind of some standalone research and submitting papers talking about how CAN bus insecurity, a lack of source addressing, authentication are kind of a security concern, but it wasn't really anything big enough to really convince the car makers that they had to start taking cybersecurity seriously. And obviously this all changed in 2015 with the GPAC. If you're playing the GPAC drinking game, you can go ahead and take a drink now every time someone brings it up. This is water, by the way, so just don't get mad at me for doing that on record. But at the time I was in school, it was pretty much underwater. There was no way I would have heard about automotive cybersecurity or car hacking. And I wasn't especially interested in cybersecurity in general at the time. To be fair, I hadn't been exposed to it very much, and I think that I would have liked it had somebody taken the time to explain it to me. But my actual, academic background is in just general computer engineering. So there's a couple of pictures of me. That's a picture of one of the buildings I used to go to in my alma mater at the U of M Dearborn campus. And this is like a picture of me. I was like on some like engineering society. I gave a speech like once or twice a year, and I wasn't very good at it. But there's a picture of me from like 6 or 7 years ago. Feel free to enjoy that. But my initial intention when entering university was I wanted to study computer engineering and then go on to medical school. For those of you not in the United States, this may sound kind of weird, but the way it works over in the US is that when you want to go to medical school, you graduate high school, you do your 4-year college degree, and at some point during that college degree, you have to take some pre-medicine classes, is what we call them. And then you can major in whatever you want, but you have to take those pre-medicine classes, and then you take your medical exam, and if your scores are good enough, your GPA is good enough, you got extracurriculars, research, all that, um, excuse me, then you're hopefully accepted into a medical school. But I did minor in Japanese at the time, and this is going to be relevant because maybe I failed to mention this previously, but I currently live in Japan, and I am working in Japan for Accenture. I've been in Japan for about 3.5 years. I live here, but I still very regularly visit the United States for events, for work, and obviously just to see my friends and family. But as you can maybe tell, right, this is nowhere near what you would call a pro hacker background. Initially, what I wanted to do was go to medical school and then study robotic prosthetics. This was what I was really interested in, was maybe going for like a research path and ending up doing some research into robotic arms, robotic legs, things that can kind of really change somebody's life. It was really something I was kind of interested in at the time, and that is what I had in mind. So in university I took my computer engineering classes and all that, but I also took like biology and chemistry classes too to supplement for my pre-med requisites, right? And then the first time I was introduced to automotive cybersecurity, and I like to be very vague with my slides because it gives me more to talk about. So you probably have no idea what's going on here, but essentially, at some point in my college, in my time in university, the dean for the College of Computer and Electrical Engineering actually changed. So we had a new dean, and he was a gentleman named Paul Richardson. It's not important, who he was. He's not super important to this story, but the point is he was new. And he wanted to have like a little event where he could connect with some of the students, some of the faculty, talk to them about his plans for how he's going to change the department, right? Obviously, curriculum changes, certain other things they're going to talk about. And one of the things that he did as part of this was hold like a little forum. So he was basically just fielding questions from anyone if they had questions about how things were going to change, new plans, so on and so forth, courses. And he advertised free pizza as part of this little, forum that he was holding. Me being, a college kid, it's like 2017 at this point, I think. I like some free pizza, right? So I still remember it to this day. Like one of my friends and I, another one of my friends who is studying pre-medicine, he's not even in the engineering department. Like we both go and attend this event because we wanted pizza. And we're sitting there, and I didn't have class for like another 2 hours, and I'm sitting there listening to this gentleman speak. I'd never met him before. He's brand new, and he's talking about how like our school is very prestigious, we're accredited, we've got alumni, graduates in every part of the world, we've got people in India, we've got people in South America, South Africa, and I'm sitting here enjoying my pizza, and from somewhere behind me, like I was like sitting up in the front, I'm a good student, right? Back in the day, I'm sitting up in the front just kind of listening. Someone up behind me raises his hand. He's like, yeah, the company that I'm interning with, they actually sent me to Japan for a summer last year. And me being, a Japanese minor, I'd always liked like Japanese culture. Like I watched like Dragon Ball Z and stuff growing up, and I always thought it was really cool. And that kind of led to me studying Japanese as my minor, because I thought, well, not only is it going to be, interesting for me, it's also a great supplement to anyone studying engineering, because there's a huge market for, consumer electronics in Japan and stuff. And anyway, he says, the company I'm interning with sent me to Japan last year for a couple of months. And I thought, I kind of want to do that. I'm going to talk to this guy. And so eventually, the event ends, and, my tummy is full of free pizza. I've got a better idea of how my, my college is going to change over the next couple of months. And I see the young man. He was actually an underclassman. He was a freshman at the time, but he was already doing an internship. Really, really brilliant guy. I kind of catch up with him and I say, hey man, I heard you mention that, the company you're interning with, they sent you to Japan for a couple of months on an internship. And I thought that was really cool. And I said, do you think, I'm in my third year of school at this point. Do is there any chance you could maybe, introduce me to someone at your company and maybe I can do the same thing? And he said, yeah, absolutely. I was like, by the way, what kind of company is it, right? Like, I had no idea at this point. I just heard, oh, internship in Japan. I was like, that sounds awesome, right? Like a computer engineering internship in Japan, something I can learn while I do. And he said, oh yeah, we're a startup. We actually work in automotive cybersecurity. And now this is pretty important because if you think about how the industry has grown over the last few years, now we have ISO 21434, we have the United Nations R155, we have legislation, we have a whole lot of terms that are very common to the automotive security industry. Now we have a well-established environment now. Back in 2017, it wasn't really like that. The only people really trying to invest time into automotive cybersecurity were a lot of really ambitious, venture, how should I say, venture companies, right? Startups, essentially. And so he said, I'm with a startup, a Japanese startup, and we're doing automotive cybersecurity. And I didn't really want to work in the automotive industry. I kind of explicitly wanted to avoid the automotive industry. And I had never really thought about cybersecurity before. So, right, like from an objective perspective, it's like I should have no interest in this in this internship because growing up in Michigan, there's kind of an assumption that if you study engineering, you're going to end up at a car company because it's Detroit, Motor City. All the car companies in the United States are based there, and it's just kind of like an underlying assumption. And I hated the idea that like it's so common for people to go into the automotive industry. I kind of was, I was kind of acting out, right? I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, I don't want to do the cars. I don't want to go and become a software engineer at Ford or Denso or one of the other big hires. Not that there's anything wrong with those places. I know people at both of them, great places to work. But I kind of wanted to be, I was being a little bit contrarian. So I was like, okay, I have no idea what automotive cybersecurity is. I had never considered the fact that you could hack a car. Like, what does that even mean? And so this young man, he said, here, I'll give you like a quick explanation of what we do. So we actually develop software that performs encryption on CAN bus messages. And I didn't know what either of those words were. Man, it feels like such a long time ago, but I didn't really understand like the concept of encryption. Like we had learned a little bit of it in some networking classes, but I hadn't actually gotten like a full understanding of what encryption did and how important it was to how the internet works today. And I didn't know what CAN bus was for sure. Like no way would I have heard of some obscure automotive technology like CAN bus, even if it was like unless it was just in like in passing in one of my engineering classes where we did a lot of like I actually used CAN bus in class at, I think the next year after that. But point is, I bluffed my way through this like initial interview. I like nodded my head along, pretended I understood everything, just because I wanted an internship, right? And I think a lot of people might kind of empathize with that, right? You're a college student, you need an internship. It's kind of hard, it's pretty competitive. You got to get in where you can, right? But eventually, I met with some of the leadership from this company. They came to visit Michigan for a conference a couple of weeks later. And I kind of hit it off with some of them, and they kind of said, hey, you're a reasonably well motivated young man. Well, let's try out an internship and see, when summer comes around, if you're interested in coming to Japan to work with our engineering team, we can have you come over. And so that's kind of what I did. So I started off as an intern in this company, working part-time in Michigan alongside my classes. And then when summer rolled around, I took a couple of months and I went to Japan. There I met the engineering team, the development team, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about automotive cybersecurity, what exactly is going on in this industry. I read up on the GPAC, and that's really like where things kind of started to make sense to me. And this is kind of like the first thing I'm going to mention as the first big piece of literature that really helped me understand what this whole industry was about is the report that Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek actually published on their research on the GPAC, right? Everyone talks about the GPAC, but to be honest, the number of people that have actually sat down and read their report, right? The report they submitted to actually disclose their findings from start to finish, it's a little bit lower than you would expect. And I think at least if you want to work in the technical sense, you want to actually do car hacking, you want to actually learn how to reverse engineer vehicle systems and how to actually exploit a vehicle from start to finish, there is no better piece of literature than that one because it goes into great detail into all the different problems with the Jeeps back in those days that led to them being able to take control of a Jeep they had never touched with just some very minor bit of information being the vehicle's identification number. I highly recommend if you want to get into technical car hacking, you definitely need to read that front, cover to cover. It's a decent bit long. It's like 30 pages or so. I don't know. It's been a while since I last read it, but that's kind of when things started to make sense for me. So that summer, after a couple of months in Japan, excuse me, let me take. I mentioned the Jeep hack again, so I've got to take a quick drink. Feel free to follow along. But at this time, I'm still an intern. I'm still not that experienced. I've got no real world development experience, right? The number of things I can actually do in my internship are quite limited. And unlike interning for like a big company where they have like, a whole lot of tasks and small things and human resources to assign someone to kind of mentor the interns and get them, find them something productive to do. It's not really like that at a startup. If you've ever interned at a startup, it's kind of like, okay, what do I do? And so I didn't really know how I could best contribute to the team. And, my technical knowledge was lacking, but I was really interested in the industry. And so what I kind of found myself landing was kind of between the technical team and the business development and sales teams. So essentially, they needed somebody who understood the technology well enough to be able to explain it and answer questions about it, who also was able to communicate effectively. And I like to think I'm a reasonably, efficient communicator. Shout out to my mom; she's an English teacher. So I was doing a lot of the early like blogging work for this small startup company. We would publish blogs about automotive security, talking about different topics, encryption for CAN bus, in-vehicle intrusion detection systems, prevention systems, so on and so forth. And eventually I became the demo guy, right? The demo guy at our company. And this meant I would understand all the products that our developers are making, and I would kind of craft technical demos to be able to showcase their functionality to people. Long story short, the original demos they had weren't very conducive to explanation to like non-engineers. And this is like important because when you're showing a new technology to a potential customer, right? The person who makes the decision is not an engineer. The engineer doesn't get to sign anything, right? You need to convince someone with very little to no technical background of the benefit of using this tool, right? And that's quite hard to do when you're selling something like encryption for CAN systems, right? How do I convince some dude who doesn't really know what encryption actually is, like at like a lower level, like that it's worth buying? And so I would spend time with the developers making visual demonstrations and learning how to give them, right? So just practicing the delivery of those. And part of what we did that year is we actually participated in the car hacking village at DEF CON as a sponsor. So really quick, car hacking village is an organization that essentially participates in a lot of different cybersecurity events around the world every year, and we bring an automotive twist to the security conferences, right? Because general cybersecurity conferences, there are a lot of them, but there aren't really that many, car hackers, right? And we're trying to increase the number of car hackers. I say we now because as of 2023 or even previously, I am now a staff member for the car hacking village. I help organize it, especially out here in Asia. I help coordinate with sponsors and different, anyone that wants to participate in the car hacking village. I'm a point of contact for that, and I help set things up for our biggest event every year, which is at DEF CON, right? So this company I was working with was a sponsor of the car hacking village that year, and so I got exposed to my very first DEF CON. If you're not familiar with what DEF CON is, it's a very large hacker conference, right? It's not really quite correct to call it an information security conference, but every year they have a huge hacker conference in Las Vegas where different researchers will publish their research. There are talks in villages, basically areas with experts in a given subject that talk about that subject and have demonstrations, etc. But while I was there, I was giving demos to people passing by, and they call it networking, but it doesn't really work that often. But sometimes it does. And I met a couple of really important people here while I was at that first car hacking village. I call it my first one because I've since attended almost every year since, because it is truly my favorite thing. The most fun I look forward to every year is the actual DEF CON weekend in Las Vegas in August every year. But I met the car hacking village founder, Robert Ghali, and he's actually somebody who had a really huge impact on my career because he taught me a lot of like the technical car hacking things that I know later on. But I also met the people who started ASRG. Now, the Secure Our Streets conference is generally, I guess, kind of considered an ASRG event. So you've probably heard of them and are quite familiar with what they do. But this is where I met those people, right? And then I also met another gentleman who I would work for later on. But that's like the next chapter of the story, right? And I also met the I don't know. I don't think I met anybody from ASRG Detroit at this point, but I kind of got involved after going back to Michigan. And I tried to get involved in the ASRG Detroit scene. So doing things like hosting events and collaborating with the different members of the Detroit car hacking community. And, you know, as time goes on, I kind of stayed with this company for a little bit longer until they unfortunately, they did go, they closed, let's just say. They closed in 2019. And at that point, you know, I was still very interested in automotive cybersecurity. I kind of found that like I really enjoyed it and I enjoyed learning about it and learning more about different technologies like CAN bus, wireless, you know, networks and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, all these things I had dabbled in, you know, as an intern. And then even after I graduated, I was still with the company until they closed. But, you know, I was still kind of learning the basics of how to perform like a vehicle security assessment, for example. And as part of, you know, an extension of that learning that I did, I started to enter the Car Hacking Village CTF competitions. So in 2017, you know, my company was a sponsor. We didn't exactly participate in the CTF, but in, you know, going forward in future years, 2018, I just kind of went with a couple of friends and we tried it out and we ended up getting second place. I met a lot of people at the 2018 Car Hacking Village that would become kind of like we made a makeshift team and we actually got second place. And then going forward the following year in 2019, a team of many of these people you can see in this picture, they were people who I met during the 2018 Car Hacking Village. You might recognize some of them. Some of them are actually quite present in the industry or in the community. But we actually did take first place in 2019, and this is, you know, to this day one of my one of the accomplishments I take the most pride in, right? And so learning how to actually perform vehicle security assessments, how to work with the technologies that are found in vehicles, and then exercising that effort, the effort I put into studying into a CTF is really the best way to kind of see what it is that there is to learn, right? So the Car Hacking Village CTF is put together by volunteers. Nowadays, I'm a contributor to it. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But truly participating in CTFs, car hacking and otherwise, is the best way to really flex that knowledge and get some, you know, benefit out of all the effort you put into learning these techniques. But going forward, you know, I did need a new job, right? The company that I was working for had gone out of business. And I mentioned earlier that I would meet somebody, his name is Yuichi Kuramoto-san. So Kuramoto-san, right, Mr. Kuramoto, I met him at the Car Hacking Village in 2017. And the reason I kind of remembered him was because when he visited the village, he was with a couple of, I think, one or two of his colleagues from Japan. And I was able to give them a demo of the product we were working on in Japanese. And they were very surprised. I like surprising people because I don't look like I can speak Japanese, but my Japanese it's decent, right? So generally they're very appreciative even if you just put in any amount of effort to speak the language. But I was able to give a full technical demo in Japanese, and you know, we kind of had a laugh and we exchanged contact information. And a couple of years later, when I'm now looking for a new company to join, I remember, hey, wasn't there another company in Japan doing automotive cybersecurity? And yeah, there was. That would be White Motion. So that's their logo is up there on the screen. So White Motion was a independent kind of. It was a startup that was started by a Japanese automotive supplier called Calsonic Kansei and a French venture capital firm, right? Like called Quarks Lab. I think they do a lot of like different technology investment stuff. They had an investment branch anyway. And they started this startup company called White Motion, and that was where Kuramoto-san was working. And so when I kind of talked to him, he said, hey, you know, you've got experience in the industry, you speak Japanese, you've worked in Japan before. What do you think of coming over to work in Japan as an automotive, you know, vulnerability researcher? And I thought, wow, I am very, very lucky to have this opportunity. And truly, like, meeting the right people has been something I'm very, very fortunate to have met these people. But I very, eagerly accepted, and I that's when I moved to Japan in 2020. And from this point, the reason it's important to bring this up is that at the time, White Motion had actually been fully acquired by Calsonic Kansei, and Calsonic Kansei had merged with the Italian supplier Magneti Marelli. So at this point, it's a little bit confusing, but all you need to know is White Motion was now owned by a very large automotive tier 1 supplier. And this caused the type of work that I did to shift, right? So I shifted from being working at a startup, performing penetration tests from an external perspective, targeting, vehicles that we could get our hands on if we had like a commissioned penetration test. Of course, excuse me, if you had a commissioned penetration test on like a device that's still in development, then you would perform this penetration test on a device with some documentation from the manufacturer, etc., like a white box test. But now that I was moving to the industry side, I'm no longer a car hacker. I'm working in the automotive cybersecurity industry, right? And this is an important, nuance difference, like because now I have to think about, okay, my main priority now is securing the devices, the products that my company makes, right? My company, obviously the supplier, creates a lot of different electronics that all have cybersecurity needs. And so our main customer is ourselves. So I started changing from, just hacking vehicles and penetration tests on different third-party devices to mainly working on devices that other departments inside our company were developing. And, this was very educational in its own way. And as this, a couple of years rolled by, and I'm sure you're all familiar with now the ISO 21434 standard, it came out, and working in an automotive supplier, right, we have a huge burden on us to reach compliance with this. And this is when I began to get more involved in the less fun part of the industry and working to ensure compliance with these standards. So things like establishing TARA procedures, risk management for the vehicle, cybersecurity lifecycle, things like incident response. So we had we did a lot of work in developing the internal incident response procedure for the company at the time, right? In the event that, someone publishes a vulnerability, or one of our cars or a vehicle with one of our components in it is hacked, and it's, after the root cause analysis, you find out that, hey, our component was responsible for this. Well, how do you respond? How do you go through the process of communicating with the right parties to remediate this? And it's a whole thing, right? And this is one of the skill sets that I kind of picked up at this time, is knowing how to go through an automotive incident response. And this is all, of course, following along the legislation and industry standards. But something I realized after, working here for about a year is that, I still don't really have a traditional cybersecurity background, right? I had kind of just jumped straight into very specifically automotive cybersecurity. So I could talk to you about things like, embedded system security or CAN bus security, and very a couple of very handpicked topics that I had, spent some time studying and talked about them in a good bit of depth. But I didn't have that background of networking or traditional cybersecurity work, right? Most of the people you see in the automotive security industry, they either used to be automotive software developers, or like quality assurance testers that then started learning cybersecurity, or the other way around. You have people who are veterans of the cybersecurity industry, but they just started learning about the automotive specific aspects, right? Whereas I had just kind of started with this very niche, knowledge base, and I felt very vulnerable because I needed to actually expand my how should I say, my knowledge base to more general cybersecurity concepts, because these are very relevant when it comes to the language behind discussing cybersecurity, for policies, for procedures, for guidelines, for best practices, for defining your goals as an organization. They use the same terminology now, right? Of course, because at the end of the day, there's a lot in common. And so at this point, I'm going to bring this up because a lot of people ask me, like, hey, are there any certifications I should get for cybersecurity if I want to do automotive cybersecurity? Well, there are, very few automotive cybersecurity certifications. I say that word a lot, cybersecurity. Anyway, there are a lot of automotive there are not a lot of automotive security certifications because it's still a very new industry. And I think as time goes on, they will, grow. We have a couple that the Auto ISAC are currently providing, but I would say that you should try and have some background in traditional cybersecurity, in traditional, you know, the traditional cybersecurity industry. Just at least some knowledge of it is very important. Even if you don't have physical work experience, understanding the process of things like, a traditional incident response, for example, or the other, OSI model, for example, very, very basic tenet of computer networking. Understanding these things and how they play into cybersecurity and applying, protections at each layer, so on and so forth, is very helpful in the long run. And so at this point, I kind of spent some time studying. I got two really helpful intermediate or introductory level certifications, the CompTIA Network Plus and Security Plus, and they really helped fill out my gaps because, like I said, I had been a little bit over specialized in automotive security, and these two certifications, studying for them, really got me to understand a little bit better the actual traditional cybersecurity aspects of this, right? Because at the end of the day, now that the industry has matured a little bit, there's a lot of emphasis not only on what's inside the car and like the car hacking aspects, but also the back end, right? Like the OEM's IT systems, right? How do they all play into the connection between the car and like the cloud and the back end systems and all the internal IT systems of the automotive OEMs and stuff? All of this is just traditional cybersecurity. And so it's really important to know that stuff too. But throughout this time after, I got those two certifications, I continued studying and learning more. And, as part of, moving to Japan, I started the ASRG Japan branch. Unfortunately, I didn't run any events until like this year. Even though I started the branch in 2020, certain global events made it very difficult to gather people together to have actual like events. So we didn't have our first ASRG Japan event until March of this year. But the point is, I had it and I planned to make it great, as much as I can. But I had to put it on the back burner until now. But, one of the things that I kind of fell into the habit of was that as we took on new projects, sometimes internally, sometimes external, we did a couple of external penetration tests in my time at White Motion. I would find that, hey, they're asking me to do something I don't really know how to do. They want to test the Bluetooth interfaces on this device. They want to test the USB interface. Please do it. And that's kind of how I ended up like learning things, right? Is as I would find that I need to know how to do it. So I'm going to learn it and then apply it to this current penetration test I'm doing. And it sounds really like half-assed to be learning on the job, but the truth is nobody can know everything, right? And the things that you do know, it's better to codify them into methodologies and understanding how you can apply them generally to different specific technologies as opposed to just only learning them in a very, narrow mindset, right? So over time, Bluetooth and USB are two of the really interesting ones that I spent a lot of time learning. So learning about Bluetooth security has kind of become a hobby of mine. It's my favorite area of security within a vehicle. So when it comes to car hacking, Bluetooth is always the first thing I look at. And that'll kind of come into play in a second when I talk about some more of my activities. But then also USB, right? Learning how the USB protocol works and how USB as a network can be used as an entry point to attack. Right? So things like exploiting drivers is a really interesting, how should I say, area of research, right? Because when you plug in, a keyboard or a USB stick into a computer, it loads a certain driver, right? That knows how to process the device you just plugged in. And that software can have vulnerabilities too, right? You can find 0 days and bugs by using malicious USB, devices, so on and so forth. There's a whole lot you can do. But, over time, I kept learning more traditional security as well. Not only, hardware embedded stuff, but also, looking more into the governance and business side of security. And this is when I started, to study for my CISSP, the Certified Information System Security Professional. Very difficult exam. You do need like a certain experience threshold to be able to receive the certification. You need to have worked in a security adjacent position for 5 years or more. And so once I had hit that benchmark, I took the exam. Luckily I passed on my first try. I don't know if I'd pass again if I took it today, but hopefully, right? But I was able to get certified with CISSP, and I felt that it was a really great accomplishment for me because it let me appreciate more the impact that cybersecurity can have on a business as a whole, right? So depending on the kind of work you want to do, that kind of knowledge is very important, because it's no longer just about, hey, I rooted this device, I'm so cool, I'm awesome. It's about understanding how it affects a business, how it affects society as a whole, right? Things like infrastructure, especially critical infrastructure, OT systems, very important to have this kind of broader mindset, right? And then, of course, I also kept on doing CTFs in my spare time. I have a CTF team here in Tokyo. It's a couple of friends. We all work for different companies. It's not like professional. We just kind of get together sometimes and we participate in some CTFs online. But I also host a CTF once in a while. So I've actually started to develop CTFs for the car hacking village every year. Right. So I mentioned that Bluetooth security was my preferred area of research. I'm the sponsor of the Bluetooth aspect of the CTF at the car hacking village every year. So if you go to the car hacking village next year and you're wondering who's in charge of the Bluetooth stuff, it's me. So I am kind of going a little bit long, so I'm going to kind of speed through these last things, but there's a whole lot that I still need to learn about. I'm still trying to add to my knowledge base. Obviously, technical stuff, but not only technical things, how to correctly apply, my experience and etc. to car hacking, because there's so much more than just knowing how to run certain commands, how to run certain hacking tools, how to write exploits. Right, exploit development is one of I think it's like the ground zero for cybersecurity, but it's also not the only thing you need to know. You need to know way more than just the technical stuff. And so I've been doing a lot of learning on things like ICS security. I want to kind of expand my breadth from only, being an automotive, specialist or nerd, to being able to work in other environments, like other industrial control system environments I find very interesting. But not only that, like I said, I'm trying to get better at exploit development. Still not quite there, but little by little, right? Things like RF, RFID, right? Using my Flipper Zero to clone hotel keys and stuff is pretty fun, but I want to get more in depth in there. Cloud security is very relevant, especially for my job, right? A lot of my clients, they have a lot of cloud security woes, and it's my responsibility to go and figure out how do I solve those, right? And so cloud security has been an area I spend a lot of time studying these days. Now, of course, things like PowerPoint too. I'm still pretty bad at the whole PowerPoint thing. My managers very frequently get on my case about not being good enough at making presentations and stuff. But finally, putting the us in industry, right? So the communities that I've been part of really have been one of the most important parts of my growth in the career in the industry, but also the reason I'm still here, right? Because it's still a very small community, right? Car hacking. You'll see like the same 15 people everywhere. And we need to bring more people into this community, into this industry. And that's really the strength of communities like the Car Hacking Village, ASRG, the Auto ISAC even, right? The Auto ISAC is more geared towards large organizations, the actual members of the industry, the OEMs, the tier ones. But they do also release a lot of, important information and educational content that anybody can consume and really learn from, right? ASRG, for example, has a huge YouTube library of hundreds of presentations that people have given about pretty much any topic you can think of. So if you're learning about automotive security and you need to find some sort of guidance or some, maybe an explanation, an expert speaking about a certain subject, you might be able to find it on the ASRG YouTube page, right? And or even just communicating within the ASRG community, right? Just finding someone who's in the community who has that expertise you're looking for and connecting with them. It's a very, open communication kind of thing, right? Car Hacking Village, it's more based around presenting at events and bringing that real hands-on car hacking vibe to the hackers. But of course, if you're ever interested, stop by DEF CON, of course, every year we'll be there. We also go to other events. So Hack in the Box in Amsterdam this year, I was there. We did a car hacking village there. Black Hat, Middle East last year, we had a really great car hacking village there as well. I don't want to get too much into that. But the point is that there is so much going on, and I try to be part of everything because I enjoy it, and that's really where I learn. Everything that I've learned about the industry and how to be, aware of what's going on, how to understand, what does a TARA mean, right? It's a threat analysis and risk assessment. Okay, but can someone explain how that actually happens, right? These are things that I can learn by being part of these communities. So I highly recommend, finding people that enjoy this, working on, car hacking and stuff, and just learning together with them and finding people who can mentor you or otherwise, grow together with you. And then of course, you can give back as well. If you have some cool research you've done, you develop some cool tool that maybe you use in your own car, right? The ability to, have the opportunity to present that and share that with people who would likewise find that really interesting is a very, unique benefit of participating in communities like this. And so, on that note, I want to say thank you for coming to the event today, and for listening. Hopefully, it wasn't too boring. I assume a lot of people would have checked out by now, but nonetheless, it was a pleasure. If you guys ever have any questions to follow up or criticisms of anything I said, maybe I made a mistake, I'd be happy to be corrected. Feel free to reach out to me either at my email listed below, or you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is not that common, so it's pretty easy to find me. And I'm not really a LinkedIn slob per se. I pretty much accept slob, not a slob, sorry, a snob. I accept anybody, right? You send me a connection, I'll accept you, and I'll be happy to chat about pretty much whatever. So thank you all so much for your time. I think I am running short, so I'm going to stop here. But I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Secure Our Streets event. And yeah, I'll be happy to hear from you in the future. Take care. Bye bye.
So, thank you for the presentation, Kamel. Not sure if you're already here. He's probably already in the lounge. So we have a small change of plans. Since we did run out of time, we unfortunately need to skip the Q&A session here live on stage. However, Kamel, you will be, as you just told me, you will be available in the lounge. So all you people who want to get in touch with Kamel, please go directly to the lounge and have a chat. Thank you very much, Kamel, also for your presentation, and see you later. Bye bye.